Well, my Spidey fans and MCU fans alike, the day has finally come. No Way Home is out in theaters. It is here, guys. People have watched it. I've watched it. We're here to discuss it. If you haven't seen No Way Home yet, you can rest assured there's going to be no spoilers in this review. I will only touch upon the stuff that we've seen in the trailers. So if you're one of those people who don't even watch the trailers, hats off to you, by the way, then probably don't watch this video either. But for those of us who have seen the trailers, you can rest assured I'm not going to bring up anything that goes beyond the trailers in this review. So with all that down and out of the way, let's start discussing the big movie event of the year, Spider-Man No Way Home. So Spider-Man No Way Home picks up immediately following the events of the post-credit scene in Far From Home. After his identity was revealed to the world by Mysterio, Peter Parker, along with his friends and family's lives, have been ruined. Hoping to get their lives back to the way they were, Peter enlists the help of Doctor Strange to perform a spell to make everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But when the spell goes horribly wrong, Spider-Man villains from every corner of the multiverse start appearing in Peter's world. And it's up to Peter, with help from MJ and Ned, to capture and send them back to the worlds where they belong. Okay, so for this review, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to start off with the negatives first. I know, no one wants to address the negatives in Spider-Man No Way Home. We're all so hyped up for this movie. We all have such a fun time with this movie, but this movie is not perfect. I do have some issues with the movie. The movie does have some clumsy writing. I especially felt at the beginning of this movie, following the events of Far From Home, felt really rushed. It really did feel like the movie sped through the events following Far From Home so that they could get to the spell and the villains as fast as possible. There's a couple of unnatural and unearned character developments for some of the characters in this movie that didn't really work that well with me, and the movie does have a lot of plot holes that, when you really think about it, don't really make a lot of sense. Bottom line is, you can be really nitpicky when it comes to this movie. Like a thread on a sweater, you can just pull and pull and pull at it until the sweater's unraveled and destroyed. But where's the fun in that? You know, sometimes you just get a movie that is so fun, so enjoyable, just brings so much joy to you that the issues and problems within it, really, you just overlook them because you just had such a great viewing of the movie. And that's exactly what No Way Home was for me. I am not exaggerating when I say from beginning to end of this movie, I just ate up everything that they were serving me. There was so much fan service in this movie that just made me, as a fan, so freaking happy that I just absolutely loved this thing. For starters, the returning villains in this movie. All of the actors that returned to their iconic roles as these villains slipped right back into the roles so seamlessly, with Alfred, Molina, and Willem Dafoe definitely being the standouts for me. I cannot tell you how much joy it brought to me to see these characters back on the silver screen, and not just individually, but how they interact with each other. That was something I was not prepared for, nor did I think going into the movie that I was gonna get. These characters, these villains, interact with each other a lot throughout this movie, and the dynamics and relationships that happen between them are so well done and just so much fun to watch. It was so delightful and so surreal to see all these villains from previous Spider-Man franchises come together in this one movie, and to see them play off of each other. And between Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, and the Lizard, the film does a really great job juggling and balancing all of the screen time between these characters. Out of the five, Sandman and Lizard definitely get the short end of the stick. They're more so in the background. For the villains, this film mostly focuses on Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Electro. But I still felt that the focus was always in the right place, and the amount of screen time that's dedicated to each one of these characters felt very appropriate to me. A benefit to that is the fact that we have seen these characters in previous Spider-Man movies before, and the film uses that to their advantage. They really don't waste any time setting up these guys. They totally trust that you remember these guys, and they do give them a couple lines of dialogue to give some backstory, but nothing that feels very extensive. For the most part, they just pick up right where these guys left off, and I love that they just got right into it with the villains. What's even more impressive is, with the abundance of characters in this movie, they never lose focus on Tom Holland's Peter Parker. This movie is all about Peter Parker, and Tom Holland in this movie is the best he's ever been. This is by far the biggest job he's ever had to do with this character. The movie still has the lighthearted, humorous tone of the previous movies, but there are also some very intense and dramatic moments that happen to Peter throughout this movie. And they grow the character of Peter tremendously. Peter goes through so much in this movie, and Tom Holland has a lot of emotional weight to carry on his back. This is the movie that truly feels like Tom Holland's Peter becomes Spider-Man. And in that sense, you can see a really beautiful character arc within Peter throughout this Homecoming trilogy. I just gotta say, as a fan, it's been a pleasure to watch Tom Holland and this character grow within the MCU. From the introduction in Civil War, through the Avengers films, through this Homecoming trilogy, he has just grown so confidently in the role. And he absolutely gives it his all in this movie. This is also the best that the trio of Peter, Ned, and MJ have been in these movies. I really liked the friendship between these three in this movie. Peter and MJ continue to be a really adorable couple, and their relationship relationship is a big part of this movie. It's where a lot of the heart lies. And they really incorporate MJ and Ned into the central Spider-Man story in this one, which I thought was great because the dynamic between these actors and these characters has just grown so much throughout these movies. You can tell that there's a real bond between them, and seeing Ned and MJ get into the Spider-Man action this time around was great. Even if it led to some strange decisions that I'll get to in my spoiler review, because there's definitely going to be a spoiler review. And speaking of action, I absolutely loved the action sequences in this movie. These are easily the best action sequences that Jon Watts has done throughout this trilogy. The bridge fight between Doc Ock and Spider-Man, heavily showcased in the trailers, plays so very well in this movie. The fighting style of Doc Ock felt very consistent with his fighting style in Spider-Man 2, and that's one of the things that this movie has, is a real strong attention to detail with these villains that really helps to make them feel like the same characters we saw in previous Spider-Man movies. There's also a lot more variety of action sequences. There's a fantastic hand-to-hand fight sequence between Tom Holland's Peter and one of the villains, which showcases a Spider-Man fight style like we've never seen this Peter Parker have before in the MCU. And the third act battle. Easily the best third act battle that these Spider-Man movies have ever had. Not just one of the best final Spider-Man battles, I think this is one of the greatest final battles in comic book movie history. It's up there with Endgame for me. And as we've seen in this trailer, Doctor Strange is in this movie. And when it comes to Doctor Strange, I felt like the screen time he has was used very well. Although they do in this movie with Doctor Strange, like I feel like they've been doing with Doctor Strange a lot in the MCU recently, and that's they use him as a device. Much like how in Thor Ragnarok, Doctor Strange showed up just to get Loki and Thor to Odin. It really does feel like the only purpose Doctor Strange is here for is to do the spell that starts the multiverse madness, and once the spell is done, they quickly find a way to get Doctor Strange out of the movie. Which, with the 2-hour running time and the abundance of characters that they have, I totally understand why they need to get rid of some. And Benedict Cumberbatch does a great job with the time that he's given in this movie. That's another thing about this movie. This movie, without credits, is like 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And it just goes by at a breakneck pace. They don't waste a single minute in this movie. Every ounce of screen time in this movie is essential. It's important. It's entertaining. You are never bored in this movie. Trust me, you're never bored. Guys, that's about all the thoughts I can say on this movie without going into spoilers. Believe me when I say that Spider-Man No Way Home does have issues. It has plot holes, like I mentioned before, that when you really think about it, don't make a whole lot of sense, and I'll get into that more in my spoiler review. But that being said, it is evident that Marvel and Sony have their hands so strongly on the pulse of the fandom, and no way is that more displayed than in this movie. As a massive Spider-Man fan who grew up with all the movies in his lifetime, this really felt like it was tailor-made for me. And just with these villains and tying them back to the previous Spider-Man movies, even before the MCU, this just felt like a big celebration of Spider-Man's history on the silver screen. Everything that worked and everything that didn't work in the previous Spider-Man movies, they embraced and in some ways pay homage to. I'm not going to stand here and say that this is the greatest movie ever made. I don't want the hype to take over me too much. As I mentioned before, the movie has problems. But believe me when I say that this is one of the most satisfying movies I have ever seen in my life. Flaws and all, it just brought a huge smile to my face for 2 hours straight, and for that reason, Spider-Man No Way Home definitely gets a strong recommend from this Spider-Man fanatic. Alright guys, that's about all the thoughts I can give you on Spider-Man No Way Home from me for now. But what did you guys think of Spider-Man No Way Home? Have you had a chance to see it yet? Comment down below, let me know without any spoilers. A spoiler review will be posted later, so keep your eye out for that. As always guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video and checking out my channel. If you like talking movies, TV, and all things entertainment, why don't you go on and click that subscribe button, click that like button, click that notification bell, all that YouTube stuff. And I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.